Hey YouTube, how you guys doing? My name is Kyle, you know me as Dragonmar, and welcome to a new video. Today we'll be going over how to take smarter fights in Valorant, hopefully to help you guys get those entry frags a little bit easier. And remember, if you guys enjoy these videos, please hit that subscribe button, and let's get started. To start things off, step number 1 is to gain as much info as possible before you engage in the fight. What this means is that you're looking to learn everything you can about where the enemy is, what weapon they have, what type of armor they might have, how many enemies are going to be there, and at the same time, you also want to use the information you have about yourself. What equipment do you have? Is range going to play a factor? For example, if you're using an SMG, these are all things that you need to consider before you take the fight. And it's why it's so important that at the start of rounds, you're not just dry peeking every angle without utility, because a lot of the times you're going to end up throwing your life away if people are using their utility properly. So how do you actually use your utility to gain info? Well, one way to use it is to flush people out of certain spots that are hard to check, like corners. You could use abilities like mollies. You know, a lot of different agents have a type of molly. Obviously with the Brimstone, pretty self-explanatory. His molly works very well for clearing out corners. You also can do something like blocking off angles. So this is a big thing. When you are peeking an angle, sometimes you can smoke a separate angle to actually completely block it off, so you can clear that previous angle you wanted to clear without having to worry about getting shot in the back or getting shot on the side. This is really big, and this is something that could easily be done with any of the classes that have smokes. Or you can create extra vision. Vision is great for getting an exact point of view on where someone is. You have Cypher's camera or Sova's arrow to be able to do this. Now, step number 2 is to think about the cover near you and use it to your advantage. So whenever you're taking these fights, regardless of where you are, you need to think about the environment around you, right? Riot put stuff in this game for a reason, and there's not a box there just for no reason. It's there for you to use it. So first, I like to think about where I can hide. Where's a good spot where I can stay hidden if something goes wrong, if I feel like it's, if something happens where I realize, oh, I can't actually take this fight, where can I reposition myself safely? Next, I want to start thinking about where I can peek from. If I peek a certain angle, is somewhere else going to be see me? If so, do I need to reposition to get a better angle, or do I need to use a smoke or something, like I said in the previous step, to block off a certain angle? And then finally, when it comes to using cover, it's really important to understand the material of what you're peeking from behind, I should say. So if you're behind a box, a lot of the boxes in Valorant are wall bangable. And this means that you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage if you try to hide behind it. A lot of what you see, especially at lower ranks, is people will take fights. They'll sort of exchange a spray of bullets. Some will hit, but most will miss. And then they'll fall back and sort of reset the fight. The problem is if you reset behind a wall that you can wall bang, you are in trouble. So it's really important that you realize if you're safe or not when you're taking these second sort of opportunities at these fights, because a lot of better players are going to realize if you're behind a box like that, they're just going to spray through it and they're going to kill you. Right, so now we know not to really hide behind boxes or not to count on them, but what can you actually use to your advantage? Walls. Walls are really important. Think about Ace Short on the map Bind. That's a great example where you can peek from the left or the right as an attacker and quickly duck behind those walls if you feel like you're losing the fight. It's really important that you find that solid cover, and I think the best option generally is to find a nice thick wall, and that's the perfect place to be able to peek from. All right. So I know that you want to take a smarter fight, but sometimes taking a smarter fight actually involves repositioning or retreating and living to fight another day or at another point in the round. This is really important that you learn this skill, and it's about planning an escape route. And the reason this is so important is that sometimes it's much worse to get a kill and then die than to not get a kill and live and fight later in the round. A lot of this comes from your utility as a class and sort of what you offer to the team. For example, if you're a Sage and you're peeking every round, you might get a kill each round, but if you die, generally speaking, that's actually worse for your team, because that means that they won't have that heal or the res or any other utility like the slow or the wall, which is all super important stuff. So planning an escape route is step number 3, and it is very important. A lot of the times after you get a kill, you tend to be a little overexposed because you most likely had to put yourself in a slightly more dangerous position. So it's really important that whenever you go into a fight, you've already thought about how you're going to get out of it. Now, there are obviously some situations where there really is no getting out of a certain position, but that's why it's so important to plan this stuff ahead of time. A lot of people get frustrated when they die after getting a kill, and they feel like their team should have been there or someone should have traded with them. Regardless of what it is, it's really important that you understand the position you're putting yourself in. You need to know what happens if you end up missing your spray. Can you actually reset, or do you need to get behind cover, reload, and take the fight again? So this is why it's really important to understand each map and where you're peeking from. If you're going onto a site, you most likely are going to be overexposed regardless of where you go. So it's really important that the way you clear that site allows you to clear certain spots so that you can actually retreat there if you start getting attacked and you need a chance to reload. So map knowledge is a huge part of how to take a smarter fight. And step number 4 is to stay quiet or keep your volume as low as possible. I'm obviously talking about your footsteps, not your actual game volume. The reason this is so important is because the more noise you make, the easier of a target you make yourself. And the reason for this is that it's really, really easy to hear enemies, not always the direction, but to hear them in general, right? I mean, we can all agree on that. So this is bad because in a game like Valorant, understanding when an enemy is going to peek by the sound of their footsteps is sometimes all a lesser opponent needs to be able to kill you extremely easy, especially get that angle on you already. They know when you're going to come around the corner. So it's just such an easy shot for most players. I shouldn't say most, for a lot of players. So take your opponent by surprise when you can. And to do this, you want to stay quiet. Part of taking a smarter fight, part of being better at taking these engagements and doing all of this sort of stuff is understanding how to use every single possible ability and perk of your agent and all your game sense, everything you know about the game, and putting it to good use. And part of this is obviously counter strafing or walk peeking. Both of these are really great ways to be able to silently reposition yourself around a certain angle to be able to take a clean and concise shot on an enemy. And both of these options will allow you to be completely silent. Now, I always recommend that before you take a fight, you start walking as well. I understand in some rushes this isn't possible, but for the most part, before you take fights as well, make sure you're walking up to that corner and not sprinting to it. Step number 5 is to bring everything together and to get that pre-aim going. Pre-aim your corner, pre-aim your angle, your spot, wherever it is. At this point, you should know exactly where you want to look, when you want to look there, and where the enemy is going to be. Now, after your first few games, you should have the map knowledge and the game sense to be able to pre-aim angles, which, as you know, is so important for taking fights in any game like this, especially in games like Counter-Strike. Valorant, just the same. You have to pre-aim. You should never be dragging your mouse up to where someone's head is going to be. You should already know that if you're checking that angle, exactly where their head is going to be, right? It can't be in that many spots. I say, well, I guess it could. But nonetheless, there is a very high chance it's going to be in one spot when you peek that angle. It's really important that you pre-aim every single time. And the reason this is so important and why it's so easy to do as well, by the way, this is not hard to do, is because you've already used all of these other steps to stay quiet, to have a way to get out, and to gain as much info as possible, as well as taking into consideration your cover. So by using all of those, you give yourself the best chance at taking a good fight that gives you a very high probability of winning. So remember, when you swing in that corner, you're aimed exactly where you want to be 100% of the time, because that is the angle you've committed to peeking. And guys, that is going to conclude the video on how to take smarter fights. I hope you enjoyed. Remember, step 1, gain as much info as possible. Step 2, think about how to use cover near you to your advantage. Step 3 is to plan an escape route. Step 4, stay quiet. And step 5 is to pre-aim at the head. All of these steps are pretty obtainable for most players. I think that a lot of people miss 1 or 2 I think the majority of people actually forget to stay quiet. I think that's a really big problem, especially for newer players, is they tend to actually give away their position before they're even around the corner. And that is a huge problem in a game like this. So if you're able to correct that out nice and early, you actually have a great chance of doing extremely well later on in the game at the higher ranks. And it cannot be understated how important gaining info is as well. You could win games solely off of gaining info. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something new. Remember, guys, I really do appreciate when you subscribe. Leave a like as well if you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, and peace.